Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are live and welcome to today's virtual book club meeting. Today we're talking about chapter 3 of this book by Brene Brown, Daring Greatly. This is a powerful book, and I believe that if you only have one book to read for the rest of this year, this is the one to read, Daring Greatly. And Brene Brown's subtitle is How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. And my goodness, boy, is it ever really impacting and influencing and transforming me. So welcome to today's meeting, 21st Century Legacy Letters Book Club. And let's see here. First of all, before I introduce my co-hosts, Dr. Becky and Steve Garvin, I want to share the things that I got from chapter 3. And we only went from the beginning of chapter 3 to page 85 because chapter 3 is so meaty. I didn't want to just go through it in one meeting. So here are the pithy phrases that I got from chapter 3. Number 1, vulnerability and love are the truest marks of courage. I mean, I'm just picking these from the sentences. And if I could, I would just underline every line of the book, but I had to pick and choose, right? So that's the first phrase that really stood out to me. The second phrase that stood out to me is, we have to be vulnerable if we want more courage, if we want to dare greatly. That's the second thing that stood out to me in this chapter alone. Number 3, a sense of worthiness inspires us to be vulnerable and share, and here's the continuation, share openly and persevere. So a sense of worthiness inspires us to be vulnerable, share openly, and persevere. And to me, a sense of worthiness is something that I need to constantly impart to my kids, because if they feel like they're not worthy of love or worthy of care or worthy of our affirmations and encouragement, then they will grow up with a sense of shame and with a sense of unworthiness, right? So that really stood out to me. That was one of my action points, is to definitely impart a sense of worthiness to our children. Okay, number 4, the secret killer of innovation is shame. Oh my word, when I read that to my husband, because he's very innovative, that really impacted him. And I said, you know what? In companies today, if there's a shame culture where you're not encouraged to share your ideas and your innovations, it's definitely going to squash innovation. And like Brene Brown said, it's the secret killer of innovation. And right after that paragraph, here's the next thing that I got, which was really pithy. If you want a culture of creativity and innovation where sensible risks are embraced, start by developing the ability of managers to cultivate an openness to vulnerability in their teams, right? So managers, if you're watching right now and you're a manager or you know a manager, then perhaps you could recommend this book or recommend that they begin exploring how they are cultivating an openness to vulnerability. Because when there's vulnerability, when there's an openness to share, and people will not feel shamed if their ideas are bad or whatever it is, but they're just open to listening to the ideas, then that will really cultivate a culture of innovation and creativity, right? Okay, number 6, here's another pithy phrase or sentence. Shame derives its power from being unspeakable. I know that when something bad has happened to me, the tendency is for me to not share it, right? Or if I did something wrong, something that maybe I should be ashamed about, if I don't open up about it, if I'm not able to say and admit that I did something wrong, then it makes shame that much more powerful. So shame derives its power from being unspeakable. Next, number 7, shame is the fear of disconnection. It's the fear that something we've done or failed to do, an ideal we've not lived up to, makes us unworthy of connection. That's what shame tries to tell us, that you're not worthy of connection, or you're not worthy of belonging. You're not worthy of being loved, because that's what shame does. And so it's basically the fear of disconnection. All right. That's another pithy phrase that I thought was really powerful. So these are phrases or sentences that I've underlined, highlighted in my book. Number 8, shame resilience is a strategy for protecting connection. And I love the fact that she calls it shame resilience. It's not the shame solution, or it's not the formula, but it's shame resilience. It's a state of being. Shame resilience is a strategy for protecting connection, our connection with who? Ourselves, and our connections with the people we care about, right? Okay, so that was to me powerful. That in and of itself, those 8 pithy phrases or pithy points or pithy sentences, they really stood out to me. And I just want to share that. Those are my takeaways from part of chapter 3. But here's something else that she pointed out in this part of the chapter. She defined guilt versus shame. Guilt says, I did something bad. And guilt can be good. And guilt is good because it makes us feel like, oh, I did something wrong. I did something bad. Then I know that I need to do something to make reparations, to resolve the problems, to resolve something that I caused, right? Shame, on the other hand, says, I am bad. See the difference? I did something bad versus I am bad. And here's my actionable idea. And here's something that immediately, when I read this part of the book, I immediately applied it to our children. Here's what I did. I'm training my children from here on in the difference between guilt and shame. So, for example, the other day, just yesterday, my children were playing with each other, and then Michael did something that to Alyssa was rude. And so she said, Michael, you are mean. Okay, so it's saying that you are bad, you are mean, and that's shame based. So I heard her say that, right? I heard her say, you are mean. So I said, Alyssa, come here, let me teach you something. I said, Alyssa, instead of saying you are mean to Michael, say, Michael, you're choosing to do something that is mean. See the difference? You're choosing to do something that's mean. So I asked her to repeat that over and over for 3 times or 4 times, something like that. And so she got it. She said, okay, I need to tell Michael, Michael, you're choosing to do something mean, as opposed to saying you are mean. And I did the same thing with Michael. I said, this is what you need to do. If you find somebody is being rude to you or disrespecting you in school, or if Alyssa's doing something to you that's disrespectful, just instead of saying you are mean, say you're choosing to do something that is mean. Okay, big difference. Okay, and here's my last point here. I wanted to just share with you the most effective path to shame resilience. This is from the book, and this is from Brene Brown. She said, number 1, practice courage and reach out. Because the thing that shame wants to do is for us to just be isolated and keep it to ourselves because, oh my goodness, how shameful that is, right? How bad you are. But no, 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 no. The path to effective shame resilience, number 1, is to practice courage and reach out. Number 2, talk to myself the way I would talk to someone I really love and whom I'm trying to comfort in the midst of a meltdown. So instead of speaking negatively or doing negative self-talk, speak to ourselves, speak to myself the way I would talk to someone I really love who is experiencing a meltdown, right? And then number 3, and here's my last point, own the story. And that's the third point in the path to shame resilience. Own the story. Don't bury it and let it fester or define me. Here's the action that she said. Say aloud, if you own this story, you get to write the ending. And to say it over and over again. If you own this story, you get to write the ending. And she based this also, and she supported this by what Carl Jung said. And this is really amazing. I love this quote. Carl Jung said, I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Now, that bears repeating. I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And so my action point there is emotional writing. She pointed out emotional writing. She said 15 to 20 minutes of emotional writing, 15 to 20 minutes a day for 3 to 4 days can produce measurable changes in your physical and your mental health. So that's it. That's my takeaway from chapter 3, the most effective path to shame resilience, the pithy phrases. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Becky because I want to get Steve on, and he was having a bit of a problem. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Becky, and I'm going to mute myself. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Becky. I would love to hear your takeaways, please, ma'am.
Okay. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me again. I really appreciate it. Our takeaways are very similar. So but that's good. That's good because we can look at all different ways to go, oh my gosh, there's mine. But we can look at different ways of how we can perceive it. So it's good. It's great. So my first one is here. We have to be vulnerable if we want more courage, if we want to dare greatly. All right. So basically it's, let me see this way. And on page 67, it talks about, just like Roosevelt advised, when we dare greatly, we will err and we will come up short again and again. So if we want to be able to move through the difficult disappointments and the hurt feelings and the heartbreaks happen and is in a fully lived life, we can't equate defeat with being unworthy of love or belonging and joy. So if we do, we'll never show up and we'll never try again. And so that brings me to, which Jackie was sharing about, is that shame is fear of disconnection. I have a story on that. I had an opportunity to race in a car race. I'm going to show off here, and I got number 2 in the division for women's racing for Jaguars, and I was thrilled with it. And so years went by, and I was working at the Chamber of Commerce, and they needed a representative, somebody to race. And there was businesses, and we're all coming together and going the racetrack. I had my Jaguar still, and so they said, Becky, come on board. We'd love to have you do that. And I said, sure, I can do that. And then they'd had me go with the attorneys and sign these papers. And all of a sudden, fear just started gripping me. Like, this is everywhere. There's businesses from all over the Northwest. They're going to come in and watch it. What if I don't? I went into the what ifs, all the fear junk, So this is what I quit. I said, you know what? I don't think I can do this. And I quit. But here's the good news, and this is part of what we're talking about with shame resilience. It's an ability to say, this hurts, this is disappointing, it's maybe even devastating, but success and recognition and approval are not the values that drive me. So I went from regrets, because I had this for years. It's like, man, I missed this great opportunity. How could I have done that? So I got stuck. And then I move forward with, as she talks about shame resilience, and as Jackie was talking about, how we change our thoughts, change how we talk to each other. And I realized, wait a minute, I learned a really good lesson. I will never make decisions based on fear ever again. Done. I will make decisions. Oh, yeah. So that was, to me, I'm no longer in regret mode. I've moved into the shame resilience mode of saying, you know what, I did the best that I could at that time, but the greater part is I learned a good lesson, and that will never happen again. And so to me, that's even better yet than me just going and doing it in fear. So your value, is your courage. And she talked, and Brene talks about that courage is again and again and again. And so I don't know, those are my takeaways, Jackie. What do you think?
Oh my, I loved your story, Dr. Becky. And so just really being aware of just being aware of that really helped Dr. Becky already. And then taking action to undo that and to never ever make a decision based on fear. Oh my goodness, folks, that's huge. Never make a decision based on fear. And how do you do that these days? Let's say, for example, Dr. Becky, there's a calculated risk that you have to take or something like that. How does that show up, and how does that manifest, or how do you keep taking action not based on fear anymore? How do you do that?
Well, it's very similar to what Brene talked about, was, that self-talk. And, as Christians, we can call it faith, and we can understand that I'm not perfect. I give myself not permission not to be perfect, but I do give my permission to go out and do the best that I can. That would be a form of self-talk. Or another thing is I would go into the what ifs. Well, what if this happens? That doesn't help me. It doesn't bring me any value. So I don't want to know about the what ifs. And I want to know what I can do and the very best that I can do. And it's okay. My value is in my courage to do it. That's on page 67. And it's a great read, just that page alone, because it's not, can I do it? It's, will I do it? And that was a lifelong lesson for me that had me do so much more after that. So.
Wow. Dr. Becky, that's fantastic. You know, your value is courage. That's one of our core values now, because we're not shame-based. We're not fear-based. We might experience some fear, but we are overcoming that by taking action and the self-talk and all that stuff. And you know, something else, Dr. Becky, I want you to speak to this, please. You know, she talked about how she reaches out to people. So in other words, if something happens that's shameful, she's open to people and saying, you know, this is what happened. And so let me just, you know, it's this one which says practice, courage, and reach out. And so she shares a story about how she did something really, really horrible and shameful. And instead of just going to her shell and feeling all that shame and it caving in on her, she practiced courage and reached out to her husband and to a trusted friend. Can you speak to that? When you are in counseling sessions, what do you tell your clients? Of course, it's all confidential, but what are the principles that you share with them in order to move in from being shame-based to being more proactive and perhaps maybe reaching out to people? Can you speak to that, please, Dr. Becky?
Oh, sure. I'd love to. So the way to get out of shame-based, first of all, is knowing really who you are. So it really goes back to your identity and who God says you are. I'm clinical pastoral counseling, and so we're about identity and who God says you are. You can say who you are, and you can make your decisions based on your own comprehension, but you're greater than you can ever imagine. Because you're here on this earth and you're unique and God made you. So that's where we use our faith and our trust, and we are just great and we have enough. Exactly what we need for whatever we're, whatever we want to jump into. And God knows that, and He loves us so much that when we can stop this, it's a perfection thing, Jackie. And when we can move from not being thinking we have to be a certain way, but embrace, here's your key, embrace who you are and celebrate just where you are in that moment. And I think that's what Brene was saying. That's enough. That's courage, and that's enough.
Oh my, powerful, Dr. Becky. Thank you. Yeah, I just really love this, where she keeps bringing us back to the point where we are enough. We're not deficient. If we have something in front of us that we are ordained to do, we are destined to do, we are enough. We have what we have to do that. And you know, just this lunchtime, I was having lunch with Jim, and my husband Jim, for those of you who are watching on the replay, and I just said, you know, I don't feel like I got enough sleep. And I caught myself. I said, oh, that's a scarcity mindset. So see, this book is already impacting how I'm talking and how I'm speaking. I said, you know, I got some rest last night. I might need more. But instead of saying I did not get enough, which is scarcity based, I said, I might need more tonight, but I slept really well, actually, during the hours that I was able to sleep. So just those tweaks alone, it puts me in a different frame of mind. And it immediately cuts off scarcity thinking. And then this chapter 3, now we're cutting off shame-based thinking, shame-based speaking. So this is just really powerful stuff, folks. So again, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. We're now in chapter 3, but we're only tackling today up to page, 85, most of 85. And next week we're going to be doing Women and Shame, the Shame Web. Yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing next week. So anyway, Steve just messaged me, and Steve Garvin, we miss you, Steve. Steve just said, thanks. Sorry. Thanks for understanding. Steve was trying to get on because he's another co-host here for today's episode. And Steve's computer is just not allowing him to come in. And he said that he was doing a lot of Zoom conferences throughout today. And so he was not able to join us today. So anyway, Dr. Becky, what are some actions that you recommend that some folks take going forward, as well as maybe something that you are stepping into that you didn't have previous to this chapter, please?
Okay. Well, I think that the one thing, the shame resilience was great. I mean, that tweaked me that much more. I mean, I know shame's not healthy. I know it's not good, but the way that Brene talked about it, and shared, the actions of listen to how you're talking to yourself, and it really made a difference, because I started doing it immediately, like you, Jackie. It was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to think that, oh gosh, this is just terrible. I have an option. There's actually options out there to where I can think, or how I want to look at things. And it was very peaceful. I mean, when we have those, mine was, the hook was regrets. That was probably my biggest thing that I carried for many years, which was ridiculous. And just one simple change of thought was, well, let's take another look. Let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's look at it in a good way of more of who you are, and what you're capable of. What are your attributes? What are your giftings? I mean, I don't know, Jackie, those are some things that I think what Brene's saying, it really comes back to, who are you and how do you want to live your life? You have choices, and here are some here for you. And my life changed basically on the no regrets, and shifting into, what, did the best that I could.
Yes, yes, indeed. I mean, that's all we can do, the best that we can. That's such a powerful point right there, Dr. Becky. Like, for example, if Michael or Alyssa can't do something, they said, and I can't, mommy. Well, all we're asking you to do is to do your best. If you can't do it, ask a grown up, right? But we're training them to do their best, to give it their best shot. And if they did it and they still didn't make it, or they didn't, they failed or whatever, it's okay. We tell them it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. And we keep honing that into their minds. It's okay to fail. It's okay to take risks, to fail. It's all right. And if they do, and if they still can't do it, we say, just ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. And in fact, I shared a story just a couple of nights ago about another adventure of Tribby the squirrel. And the life lesson there was, it's okay to ask for help. So folks, I mean, here in it's such a shame-based culture that we live in right now. Folks, it's okay to ask for help. It really, really is. It's okay to reach out to a trusted friend and say, what do you think about this? Or I'm struggling with this, or this just happened. I did something terrible. Can you just, help me through this, or walk with me through this? That's all we need to do, is just get out of ourselves and reach out to someone else. Just have the courage to reach out to somebody that you trust, whether it's a spouse, or if you're not married, maybe it's a trusted friend. And if you don't have that kind of friendship, then begin cultivating that kind of friendship, right? So I want to give Dr. Becky the final word. Dr. Becky, any final thoughts, please, on this chapter? It's a powerful chapter.
Well, one thing that to add on to what you were sharing, you can reach out for help, because shame is a fear of disconnection, and we know that. And so that's one of the breaking points. You want to move into that. But even still, when we are afraid, or we're fearful to move out and do what we want to do, I would just say to you, make it, and you don't do it well the first time, you can find out and learn so much by your mistakes. And I don't think our culture, Jackie, talks about the value of messing up. That's where we learn. I mean, my gosh. I mean, we could go back to the light bulb being invented. How many times, the guy tried. So I just want to encourage you, if you're fearful or you feel shame, you have options. And you also, right, it doesn't matter, because you can still learn and grow, and take what you've done wrong. And like I did, I missed that opportunity, but you know what? But I've got many more because I use that mistake to grow me and mature me, and so that's my final takeaway.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Becky. And for those who have experienced really, really traumatic things, like she talks even about rape and really, really horrific things that happened to them. I think the thing that will really help them at least move the needle forward is just taking one step to ask for help, whether it's a friend or a trusted friend, or maybe somebody that you know, that maybe a counselor, maybe it could be, writing on a journal your thoughts, at least starting the emotional writing. I mean, what did she say? What did she call it? I think it's emotional writing, where you take 3 or 4 days a week and you just start writing about your emotions. That's powerful in and of itself. Yeah, she calls it emotional writing. 15 to 20 minutes a day, right here, emotional writing. 15 to 20 minutes a day for 3 to 4 days. Just that alone can produce measurable changes in your physical and your mental health. So if you've experienced any kind of trauma, please, we really don't rob yourself from that. Oh, look, Steve's right here. Hang on. Let me see if Steve can come in. I'm going to invite him. So Steve, let me see if you. He says hi, Jackie and Dr. Becky. So anyway, if you've experienced trauma, my encouragement to you, because I've experienced trauma, and my encouragement to you is, please do not keep it to yourself. Please share it, because as Carl Jung said, right? Where's that quote from Carl Jung? I don't know. I don't want to butcher it. Carl Jung said, I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Right? So I just want to encourage you, if you've gone through any kind of trauma, especially those who are, who were in the war, and you've gone through really a traumatic time. I mean, war is traumatic. Just reach out, ask for help. All right, here's Steve. I want Steve to. Hi, Steve. Okay, I'm going to give the platform to Steve. Hi, Steve. How are you? I see you now. Oh, your camera is a little bit. Can you maybe talk to us? Say something.
I can hear you now.
Cool.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Steve, can you share your takeaways from this chapter? I mean, I'm going to put you on the screen, but if your picture doesn't show up, we'll just have to listen to your audio. Go ahead, sir.
Okay.
There you are.
Am I on now?
No. Yes, you're on. You're on.
I'm so flustered with dealing with technology. Maybe that's my takeaway from it all. But yeah. As you know, I'm a big fan of Brene's, and I really wish I would have caught the first bit of this, because I totally feel unprepared. Yeah. No worries. I don't know what else.
No worries. Let me just get you up to speed here. We were just talking about in chapter 3. I quoted some pithy phrases like vulnerability and love are the truest marks of courage, and Dr. Becky also had her pithy phrases. And then we talked about shame resilience, which is the main point that I really wanted to hone in on, which is she pointed out 3 points: shame to the most effective path to shame resilience: practice courage and reach out. Number 2, talk to myself the way I would talk to someone I really love. And then number 3 was what was number 3? If I can find number 3, I will show it to you. Here it is. Own the story. Own the story. Don't bury it and let it fester or define me. And as Carl Jung said, I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become. So anyway, can you speak to that, please, Steve?
Yes. In fact, the thing that it seems really super counterintuitive, But the way to deal with shame is to not run away from it, but to embrace it. To embrace who you are and where you are and how you are in the moment. That we're not the best way to aim is to put up a facade and kind of a barrier between you and the other person. But when you accept you as you are, then that gives other people permission to do that as well. And if they don't, as the way they are, you are, then as long as you continue to hold that space for yourself, then that's up to them. But generally, good people, and I don't mean to put value statements on here, but most good people, when vulnerable and when you are being authentic, they'll open their arms to you. And so with most things, the things that you resist the most persist the most. So and open to it. And I liked one of the ideas that, and I don't know if it was in this, but early in the book, how Brene Brown talked about how she wants to make a culture within her family of shame resilience, that where they talk about things openly, and it's not, all these secretive type things, but that it's this open environment where they accept each other wholeheartedly.
That's powerful, Steve. I mean, that alone is when we're cultivating that shame resilience in our family. That really helps our children become shame resilient. They're just going to say, no, I'm not going to take that. That's shame based. And Steve, what would you say to somebody? Let's say, for example, you meet somebody, an acquaintance introduces somebody to you that has gone through some kind of trauma, whether it's rape or whether it's some kind of verbal abuse or emotional abuse or whatever kind of abuse. Or what would you say to somebody who's gone through trauma, and how do they get, because shame will immediately make them feel, oh my gosh, I'm unworthy of being loved, and I'm unworthy of being someone that you want to connect with. What would you say to them, Steve?
Well, first, having people in my life that have dealt with that, more about being who you are with them than necessarily what you're saying to them. That you have that open space for them to be who they are as they are. And also, I always saying, well, this is a thing to say because what you might say to one person might not work well for another person. I think that the bigger thing, honestly, is to listen, to hold that space open for them to process however they're processing. Because I mean, dealing with things like that, it doesn't, I mean, you don't get over it in 5 minutes. I mean, it's, it tends to be a long process. And just, being with them however they are, wherever they are with it right now.
Powerful, Steve. Thank you. And thank you for being vulnerable. As I've shared before earlier, I have gone through some traumatic situations. So definitely it's something that, we're not, nobody in this world is scot-free from some kind of trial, tribulation, or even trauma. So thank you for sharing that, Steve. That means a lot to me when it's coming from you, a masculine man sharing and being vulnerable. Thank you. So anyway, folks, we want to keep it to as close to 30 minutes as possible. And thank you, Steve, for joining us and for just doing your best to just come in. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
You're kind of breaking up on me right now. But I think that there's a huge room for men to be vulnerable. I think it's not that men aren't vulnerable. It's that there's not space for men to be vulnerable. We deal with challenges just as much as anybody else does, but the culture is such that it's hard to share that and to be open with that.
Wow. Indeed. So yeah, definitely. This is kind of hard to share because it's not really my story, but a really good friend of mine, her son committed suicide. And it's because he went through, and he was in the military, and he went through very traumatic experiences in the military. I mean, the war and everything. And he couldn't handle it. And there was no, I would say, the support system, like you said, for men to be able to talk about it, to be able to go through things that they've seen, things that maybe they've done, right? But because there's not that space for it, there's not that room for it. Um, there are people that are dying on the inside, and they just check out because they cannot handle the pain. So, such a good point, Steve. And I really, really hope that there are folks that are listening that can maybe influence and persuade folks to just open up and talk with them, make room for them, like Steve's saying. So thank you so much, Dr. Becky. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you so much, Steve, for doing your best to just hop on. And you came, and you are such a, you persevered and you did it. Thank you for sharing all that you've shared, man, in spite of all the tech stuff. And folks, thank you for joining us again. And we look forward to being with you again next week on the next virtual club meeting. We're going to talk about the rest of chapter 3. And we look forward to being with you again in the 21st Century Legacy Letters Virtual Book Club. Thanks so much, folks, and goodbye.